Hot shit. Hot shit. Let's go. 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 Go.
New study just came out recently, was shared on Daily Mail, and it's right up my alley. I was excited to see this because this is something that me and my conservative conspiracy world was well aware of this for a long time, but now science is starting to catch up. Apparently scientists have come out and they said that all humans are descended from just two people, and there seems to be a catastrophic event that almost wiped out all species possibly 100,000 years ago.
Are they confirming the Old Testament just now?
So I'll dig a little deeper because it kind of plays into the Old Testament, but maybe not so much from a religious standpoint. But yes, the Old Testament kind of plays a role in this too. So shouts out to these scientists. So apparently the genetic barcodes of 5 million animals from different species were surveyed. The research deduced that humans and animals sprang from a single pair, and this happened after a catastrophic event long after the last ice age. So all modern humans descended from a solitary pair who lived 100,000 to 200,000 years ago. Scientists surveyed 5 million animals, including humans, and from 100,000 different species, and deducted that we sprang from a single pair of adults after a catastrophic event almost wiped out the human race. So they did a bunch of snippets of DNA, and basically they came down to the mitochondrial parents of like, oh shit, it looks like, and that has been said before about the whole out of Africa thing, that everyone came from mitochondrial Eve, which was a woman who walked upright in Central Africa like 100,000, 200,000 years ago, and she's the mother of all of mankind as of today. And and so they're talking about it, and they're just interested about it because it's big data. We go off of the human evolution and all these different things, so on and so forth. You do have the Old Testament, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the thing that's interesting for me that floats my fancy is that one of my favorite authors is a man by the name of Graham Hancock. And Graham Hancock put a book out in the early 1900s called Fingerprints of the Gods. And
that was from the early 1900s?
No, 1990s.
Okay. I'm like, I thought he was still alive.
No. So yeah, he's still around. He's still doing his thing. But so Graham Hancock put a theory together in the 1990s, early 1990s, and he said that he showed how you have the pyramids in Egypt, you have these pyramids out in China, there's pyramids in Mexico, there's pyramids like everywhere, Bosnia, like there's pyramids all over the place, and all of them seem to date back to a certain time, if you will. Certain period where everyone was making pyramids. And so he's like, how were all the humans across the world like kind of on the same wavelength? And so basically true. What's up?
I said no, very true.
Yeah, so it was like, why did everyone seem to be kind of doing the same thing back during this time? And so basically what he deduced through all his findings was it seems like, well, no, because Pangea is from like millions of years ago. And so this is all recent stuff. This is within the last 100,000, 200,000 years. And so he came to the conclusion that there's some, that we're a species with amnesia, and there's some parent civilization. There's some lost civilization that all of our stuff seems to come from. And he kind of used the Atlantis theory that maybe Atlantis did exist, and maybe the Atlanteans were more advanced than all the rest of us. Maybe they did go through some kind of cataclysm, and they spreaded their information across the, all these other cultures. And that's the reason why everyone's doing pyramids and kind of doing all the same thing around the same time. So that was Fingerprints of the Gods in the 1990s. So
can I pause you, man? Like, just on the concept of Atlantic, like, do you feel like that could have any correlation with Noah's Ark, the Noah's Ark tale, and how, there was a...
We're getting there.
Oh.
Yeah, so we're getting there.
I'm intrigued.
So that was the thought process or whatever. And so, then, it got a little deeper with, you have the Sphinx, where the Sphinx, which is that lion face structure out in Egypt, and it looks like there's like water erosion damage on it, which shows they used to be in a rainy climate, and it didn't.
That's the connection, the Sphinx and the Spix and how they're wetbacks. Like they're saying that they come full circle like that. But keep going.
But so yeah, so when you go back in time, there was a time when the climate was much different in northern Africa, where it did actually rain before the Sahara Desert was a thing. It used to be very wet out there, and so then that puts the Sphinx possibly back 100,000 years. That structure is a whole lot older than we realize, so on and so forth. So they've been doing all these studies, and Graham Hancock and Joe Rogan have actually made pretty good friends over the years. And so Graham Hancock has been on there a couple times, and over the course of the past year, they came across another man named Randall Carlson. And Randall is interesting because he's been chasing this cataclysmic event where it seems like a bunch of meteors hit the northern hemisphere of Earth, and it seems like it wiped out a whole bunch of humans. That's when the woolly mammoth died. There used to be camels in America. They all died. Like all these species all over the northern hemisphere died around the same time. And it seems like humans died around that same time. And what we know as our history is a rebirth. And then the reason why the Old Testament comes into play is because the Old Testament may be a recollection of a time when there was all these cataclysmic events where meteors crashed down. Meteors could have hit the ocean, and a big enough meteor hits the ocean, it's going to cause a tsunami. What is that tsunami going to do? Water's going to go on land. It's going to flood all over the place, because the Noah Ark thing is an interesting tale, because it's not just the Old Testament that talks about flooding. In there, almost every single ancient civilization from tens of thousands of years ago talk about this massive flood that almost wiped out everybody in their town. Like, this is a story that the Native Americans talk about it. The Middle Eastern people talk about it. Everybody talks about this. There's a lot of
things that are literally, they come from every other religion. It's just it's our reference point. So when I mention it, I don't mean that it's just the one tale, the one and only. It's just it's a reference point that goes all across the nations, like you mentioned.
So what may happen, and again, that's the reason why I'm a person who, people get kind of mixed up on my beliefs. I'm a person who, I don't believe in religion, but I do believe in God, and I do believe that the Bible is an actual important book, historic book. Chances are is that the Old Testament is actually talking about humans trying to reestablish themselves on Earth. And it's interesting that Graham Hancock has been talking about this for 20-something years. Robert Schoch has talked about some of this stuff. Randall Carlson has talked about some of this stuff. And now mainstream scientists are like, wait, there seems to have been a cataclysmic event recently that might have wiped out a bunch of humans. Yeah, that's what we've been talking about. So the whole point of all this is that the human evolution isn't linear. It doesn't just go, humans didn't start in this and then they just moved all the way up. There may be peaks and valleys and ups and downs, and we may have no idea how many times this shit has rebooted. You go back to the Bronze Age. We know about the Bronze Age and the Iron Age and all that. Why do we know that? Because those things are still around. But for all we know, there could have been ancient civilizations that used other stuff that wasn't around for a while. Let a cataclysmic event happen today and wipe out everybody in America, and then you fast forward 10,000 years, what is still going to be around? Plastic is still going to be around. Mount Rushmore is still going to be around, and the Hoover Dam is still going to be around. Everything else goes back to the Earth. And then that's the reason why we're living in the plastic age.
Why is the Hoover Dam hailed as being a monument that can still withstand?
Because that is one hell of a man-made structure. That is, there was a book called I forgot the name of it. Alan Weinstein, I think it was his name or whatever. But the Hoover Dam is designed to last for thousands of years without any type of human maintenance on it. And it's also interesting because they built it and they put a star map in it. So if everybody gets wiped out, we lose the English language, we lose calendar, so on and so forth, there's a star map in it. So a civilization down the line, once they figure out how the stars move and all that, they could pinpoint off the star map when the Hoover Dam was made.
And really?
Yes.
That's thinking far out.
that's thinking far out, because again, all these other, like, we have houses, are
But think about the materials. Like, I'm also thinking to myself, like, if we have survived, I don't know how many millions of years, right, on this earth, like, you got to think at some point, especially if we had a certain kind of stone or metal, maybe that, because maybe we might have been super hella advanced, right, back in the day, that to bring our demise, possibly, if it wasn't from some out of the universe interaction. Like, we had to have run out of some of that stuff, wouldn't you think? I mean, just how some animals become extinct, wouldn't we have lost materials?
Yeah, and that's the same thing with we were talking about the Chromebook earlier, how everything is moving to the cloud. So we'll eventually, let's say 50 years, 50, 100 years from now, we're no longer writing anything down. Everything is up in the cloud. Something happens, the cloud disappears. There's no record of any of this. And then again, that's the reason why we live in the plastic age, because if we are all wiped out, the only thing that's going to stay around is plastic. And everybody like, oh man, this generation of people, they made a whole bunch of stuff out of plastic. No, we made stuff out of a bunch of stuff, but it's just plastic is what survived. The other thing that's interesting too, when you come into sea levels and how sea levels move, you have I think it's something like 70% of human civilization across the world lives to a coast. For the most part, the majority of people live by the coast. That's the reason why California has so many people. That's the reason why the East Coast has so many people. The majority of people, they clutter up around the coast. So imagine if the sea levels rise and California disappears. California existed at one point, but it's under the water now. So we have no recollection of it. So we, for all we know, we don't know how many civilizations were around that are underwater now. We don't know. Okay. And there's been a ton of cases of them finding stuff, and they're like, oh shit, there's a city like underwater, but all of it's like ruined because it's been underwater for thousands of years. We don't know. We are a species with amnesia, and I love that science is finally catching up that something happened, and it killed off the woolly mammoths, and humans may have been more advanced not too long ago, and we did all start over. And the Old Testament might be humans trying to understand what the fuck just happened, and that's part of the reason why possibly they think that God is so angry in the Old Testament, because they're writing like, oh my God, we're trying to survive, and these fucking meteors are hidden, and these floods and all this stuff is going on. They have no idea how to explain what they're going through. They're writing about a cataclysmic event, and science may have proven that, yeah, that shit did happen. Message. Oh shit, did I lose Papo? Damn, I think Papo got deep in thought, man. He praying right now, because that shit just got a little too real. But shouts out to this article real quick, just to see if they got anything else on it. It says, if a Martian landed on Earth and met a flock of pigeons and a crowd of humans, one would not seem more diverse than the other, according to the basic measure of mitochondrial DNA. Culture, life experience, and other things can make people very different, but in terms of basic biology, we're like the birds. The mitochondrial DNA examined in the research is that which mothers passed down from generation to generation. It showed the absence of human exceptionalism. Apparently, one might have thought that due to their high population numbers and wide geographic distribution, humans might have led to greater genetic diversity than other species. At least for mitochondrial DNA, humans turned out to be low to average in genetic diversity. The study has been misunderstood by some religious parties who thought it meant that we all came along into being in some seminal Big Bang type event 100,000 years ago. That's not what the findings actually suggest. What Stoyak and Fowler's findings point to is that our species has to revamp far more often than we thought, and we do so in unison with the animals. So yeah, shouts out to science, man. Shouts out to science.
Yo, mic check, can you hear me?
I can kind of hear you in the background. I don't know if your mic's on.
Cool. Working my way back here. I'm sorry. Had to do some maneuvering.
You did.
Yeah, family came back, had a chance to put the baby back to his crib. It was flawless. Put a titty in his mouth, he's a happy camp.
But so I recommend people read Fingerprints of the Gods. read Magicians of the Gods, go back, watch some of the Joe Rogan episodes with Randall Carlson. He shows fucking graphs and he shows pictures of cataclysmic events and evidences of massive floods and evidences of asteroids hidden all over the northern hemisphere. There's this thing called glass melt, and essentially, let's say you let off a nuclear bomb somewhere, the nuke blows up, it melts some of the sand, and it melts the sand in a way where it turns into this glass melt, and that's high level of heat, if you will. There's glass melt all over the northern hemisphere, which isn't nuclear related. It appears that it's the direct result of asteroids hitting the ground and causing glass melt, and it's all over, and all of it points back to around the end of the last ice age. And that's the other thing, is the last ice age ended abruptly. There was a moment of global warming that we haven't been able to account for, and it appears that maybe that's what it is that there's a massive cataclysmic event where maybe one huge meteor hit or many smaller ones hit, and similar to the ones that fucking killed the dinosaurs 65 million years ago, something like that happened within 10 to 200,000 years ago that damn near wiped humans out, but we survived. We're here to make this podcast.
Yo, let me ask you something. Do you ever wonder in throwing in extraterrestrials out there, looking for resources? And I know I keep getting stuck on the resources part, but the one thing that we do have a majority of is water. And with them, scientists talking about wanting to recreate woolly mammoths to try to give a balance of that we might need to somehow shift the climate. I don't know how the fuck that's possible, but let's say that all makes sense. Going in, let's say again, we eventually had to have some kind of peace treaties with some other entities to where they want the one resource that we have a lot of, and that's the water. Do you feel like that removal can only help us? Like, do you think like we're like a lemonade stand and we'll get real lucky if some niggas need some water?
So, and that's the one thing that's interesting. Until we find some actual more life on Earth, life in the universe, it's kind of hard to tell what exactly is going on. But so water is a big thing on Earth because it's the majority of what we're made up of. But let's say the aliens come from a place where instead of water, they have liquid nitrogen or whatever. And so maybe their bodies are made of 70% liquid nitrogen. And so there's no telling if they would be coming to get like water from us. One of the theories, though, and it goes back to the Sumerian tale. There's a tale of the Sumerians, how they said aliens came down here, and aliens came down to Earth, and us humans, we weren't that intelligent, so they genetically engineered us from monkeys to make us a little more intelligent, to turn us into slaves to help mine gold, because then they had to take the gold back to their atmosphere because their atmosphere was deteriorating and they needed the gold to rebuild their atmosphere and all that. And that thing became kind of plausible because that was something that was told thousands upon thousands of years ago. And it's interesting because science has proven, there would kind of be a way to reconstruct your ozone layer with gold. And so either the people thousands of years ago knew that when they came up with that tale, or aliens did show up and they were looking for some gold. So there's no telling. There's no fucking telling, Papo.
Yeah. Which way the asshole blows.
There's no way to tell.
Oh, yeah.
If you didn't like this podcast, it's probably cause you're racist.
Yeah.
Fuck your feelings, though.
Yeah. What's up, man? You hear me?